I know, you're thinking.
I already know how to planar track an object in DaVinci Resolve Fusion.
But today, if you're up for it, I'm going to take you on a more in-depth chapter mark sign replacement tutorial that's going to cover things like how to composite in Fusion with ACES and OCIO view LUTs so that you can blend HD and SDR elements to mimic the real-world light and perfectly round trip the VFX plate to color. I've got some pre-processing tips to get better results from the Fusion Planar Tracker that it gives out of the box. I'll show you how to avoid distortion on a logo insert when the dimensions of the elements are not matching where you're putting them. How about adjusting for a curved edge? Have you ever had a curved monitor that needed a screen, or maybe you had lens distortion to deal with? You'll learn how to color match to the plate and also create some sky separation. Finally, we'll take the footage into the color page and grade underneath an ACES transform to Rec. 709. So this is after. If you'd like to follow along, I have the footage and project file. It can be downloaded from my website, creativevideotips.com, by joining the Cutting Club. And thank you so much to those that have already joined because it really helps support these free tutorials. So we have an sRGB graphic that I want to be inserting into this Mr. Rogers billboard here outside of Dallas. So to quickly get into Fusion, a quick tip I'll give you right off the bat is if you disable this clip, whatever the playhead can see, meaning if I disable this, it'll take whatever it can see straight into Fusion. And the reason I want to go straight into Fusion from a clip and not make what they call, if you right click and say a new Fusion clip, is it retains all the source aspect ratio and timecode information. So now that that's turned off, I'll go into Fusion. And if you see this the first time and you're wondering, how do you get that nice big viewer on the left side? Well, I'm using a layout that's sort of new, and it's under the workspace layout presets, Fusion presets, called Midflow or Midflow Vertical is what I've got loaded right now. And this just gives you a much nicer, bigger way of making use of, like half of your screen real estate for one viewer. If you want to see a split view of them, that's easy to do with an A-B split over here, which we're going to get to a little bit later. Also to know, you might be tempted to hit Z on the keyboard to zoom to fit. It's not that over here in Fusion, unfortunately. Your little shortcuts are going to be up here. That's your Z depth, which there is none. Just go back over here to the color channel and you see color again. To zoom it to fit, you're going to use Command F or Control F on a Windows machine. All right, so let's get started and get rid of this flat log footage that was sort of compressed for the camera to color grade. We actually want to expand this out to the ACES linear space called ACEScg. So to add that, we're going to hit Shift Space on the keyboard to open up our tool picker. And if you just start typing ACES, which is Academy Color and Coding System, hit Add, and it adds it right after. Now, if you want to actually see the results of this, just pick and flick this over into the viewer, and you get a little pro tip here. If you're ever trying to troubleshoot stuff, you'll see what state you're looking at by looking up here. So if I wanted to just see the media in, you can see it there. Now we've added the transform. It's right there. The nice thing I like about ACES a lot is it's hard to really mess up. It's very simple. There's not a ton of controls like DaVinci Color Management. So what we got over here is ACES version is ACES 1.3. The input transform, this one's important. This one is basically saying what camera did you shoot with and what color profile. So this is an A7 IV, which was shooting the Sony S-Log3 S-Gamut 3 Cine. Now, note on this one, there's also a Venice version. This is not the Venice version, so choose S-Log3 S-Gamut Cine or whatever your camera is. And then the outputting to the ACES flavor called ACEScg. You do not want to choose ACEScc or CCT. These are great for color grading, but they're not great for compositing. So we'll choose ACEScg, and we're not going to do any gamut compression because we're going to make a little sandwich out of this, and we want it to round trip perfectly. All right, with that done, we can take a look at it over the monitor, and it just got way dark. Now, the reason that is because we're looking at linear space or linear footage on an sRGB monitor that has like a gamma to it. So to fix that, the OCIO display view LUT, and you see it didn't change, and that's because you have to actually load the config file, download the config file and load it into here each time. I don't know if there's a way of getting this to save it. So it's looking for an OCIO config file. And where you can get that from, I'm going to put the link down in the description of this video and on the tutorial on my website. But it's from you can see the OCIO website here. You'll go to the quick start and you can see OCIO version 2 configs. Click that. What that'll do is it'll take you to this GitHub page, and what you want to be choosing is the studio config, which is going to have all the camera information in it for version 2.3. Okay, so if you click this right here, it should download it. It's a one single file. It's not this big giant thing of LUTs like you used to have to do. That's one of the nice things with OCI 2 is it's all sort of built into one. Put this on your system in a place you can always reference. So I have mine in my movies folder. And so over in Resolve, what you'll do is you'll say, where's that OCIO config file? Oh, it's there. Click open. And then you can use this, and it has more features. See these gain and stops and the color gamma? That's really helpful to bring it up and down when you're matching colors. Now the source space is going to be, what you guessed it, ACEScg, and we're going to be looking at through an sRGB display. There's a lot of other options here depending on what you're working with and looking at. So the cool thing is you see this gain slider. It gives me a lot of control to sort of, you can pull it way up to match black levels or pull it way down to match bright levels. Okay, I'll just leave that down here on the side. So that's the initial setup for the footage. Now we need to round trip this back, so when we go to the edit page, we have a perfect round trip. And the way we'll do that is we'll take this ACES transform, Command C, Command V to paste it. And on the second one, we're going to reverse these two, okay? Unfortunately, there's no reverse button like there is with the normal Resolve color management tool, but you can just go in here and say, okay, the input now is going to be ACEScg, and then we're going to do the opposite and go back to Sony sLog3 sGamma 3 Cine, and this should be giving us a perfect round trip. And the way you can look at that is disable the view LUT, look at the media in one, look at this, they shouldn't be changing, as well as over on the edit page, if you turn off everything and back on, you shouldn't be seeing a change. For the graphic, that's kind of a different story. That one is going to be this logo right here, okay? Good old creativevideotips.com, sort of Google-fied, so we can exaggerate colors. This can't just be put into this comp without being placed in the ACEScg as well. So that's the other thing to think about. When you're doing these color managed comps, all your assets, if you want them to live in that scene, in that world, need to be transformed. So the transform you use for that, I'm going to load another ACES transform, load it into the viewer, and you can see the colors are wacky because I have this default to Sony sLog 3. By the way, if you have the same cameras all the time, the reason this populated this way is because I set this as a default. Any tool in Fusion, if you right-click on the word, on the name up there, you can go down to Settings, Save Default, and that will be what is pre-populated the next time you use the tool. This is a PNG graphic. The input transform for this, you might think is sRGB, which there's an option for that, but it's not actually. When we're going to work in linear space here in Fusion, you want to be choosing the sRGB texture mode, which basically would be anything you really grab from the internet or that comes from Photoshop is going to be sRGB texture, and it's going to remap it into the ACES space for us. The linear version, that would be for HDRIs, things that are already linear but have sRGB color primaries. Now, if you want to take a look at this, we could simply merge one over the top of the other. Again, if you want to take the one that's on top over the one on the bottom, that gives you a merge. And then we need to turn our view LUT on again so we see this in the right space. And then if you want to sort of shrink them down, you can kind of see we're kind of working in the same worlds. Now, this white doesn't match this white, and we will get to that color matching later on. But if you were going to go to the edit page and take a look, I guess we need to pipe this out through the transform. If you go to the edit page, you can see now we're kind of looking at this sort of in the same world that's done a lot of color mapping for us and done a lot of the heavy lifting, which is great because the more the computer can do, the more we don't have to do. So now if I've maybe sold you on ACEScg, I will tell you to pre-process this for the Planar Tracker, it's best to not actually use ACEScg, but to use Rec 709. So I'm just going to click anywhere over here. Wherever you click is where it's going to drop the node. Okay, so I'm going to click right here and type in ACES again, ACES transform, and then this one is still going to be the input of the Sony camera, but the output on this time is going to be Rec 709. Okay, I'm going to take the original footage, pipe it into there, disable my view LUT because I don't really need it right now. And I'm going to be starting to track the good old Mr. Rogers sign here. Now, one of the other pre-processing steps that I usually do is I sharpen the image. So To do that, shift space, there's a sharpen node in here. And what this allows it to do is when the planar tracker is going to work on it, it just has a little bit more grit to it, a little bit more detail to grit those pixels. I will mention there's another tool in here that's called the texture pop. If you're ever really struggling with a track, you can always try using the texture pop tool. Change this to luma chroma, change this to difference magnitude, and then you can crank this up and you can kind of reduce the idea of like there being color issues, like if you had a flare or some sort of flickering lights. This is another way to get tracking data. It's kind of like using a high pass filter on it instead. So we don't need it for this, so I'm going to get rid of it. Just know that the texture pop is a useful tool to getting a better track. After the sharpen, okay, let's look at the sharpen. It's kind of nasty, but it's fine. We're going to add the planar tracker. So PTRA is our planar tracker. Now the planar tracker works a little bit differently than the Mocha tracker, where the Mocha tracker would want you to draw a polygon right outside the edge of the object. You don't do that with the Fusion tracker. What you actually do is you track always on the surface that it wants to be looking at. It does not want those extra pixels, so don't give it. And the other thing that's worthwhile pointing out here is you don't have to draw like a perfect box or anything. What you want to be doing is just make sure you're not including things like reflections and shadows, because those don't actually belong to the surface. They need to belong to the rigid body that's in there. Now, I purposely put an easy thing to track in here so you're not stumbled up on this. So we've got this set. We hit the set button over here. I'm on frame 71, which is the largest and, I mean, sharpest, but they're all about the same. We want the largest, sharpest, least blurry type of frame to start your track on because it works from a reference. So I'll hit set over here and it's going to pick that reference frame over there to start tracking on. And you've got a couple options for the algorithms. There's the point one, which is typically what I use most of the time. And then there's also one over here called hybrid point area. The difference between these two, well, one, point is faster, hybrid point area is longer. Typically, you need to put a garbage mat if you have any sort of occlusions for hybrid point area, because this one can throw away data automatically if it doesn't think it works. This one cannot, but I've already tested with hybrid point and it works fine. And then the motion type down here, if you've got weird jitters and stuff, it starts with perspective, which is the most detailed information. It means you're doing like this motion and this motion. Well, if you go to more information on the data that's collecting, sometimes you can get a better result. This one, again, it's easy. We'll leave it at perspective. I'll track backwards by hitting this button right here, and we'll see that thing track backwards. So you can always start from any frame to track, and the idea is you want to track from whatever's the largest and least blurry. It just so happened that the last frame on this was that in this case, but you could start from the middle. It's just everything works from a reference frame. The reference frame is also what the corner pin up here is going to be using when we place our logo in. Now, to check the quality of the track, the only way you can really do that here in Fusion is to hit the steady button, which sort of locks off the sign, the area that you track. If I want this to be set to a steady frame of, 30 whatever, let's say we want it to be set to 30, you just hit set on there and that makes that the full frame. And so the idea is you take your cursor in, you take your hand off the mouse or off the tablet, you hit play and see, is that moving? And you'll see, yeah, it is jiggling, but that's because this has rolling shutter and there's motion blur, so that's pretty normal. But you can see it's pretty much sticking. So you just want to check your corners, make sure nothing is sliding off. You can see my cursor right there is staying put. The sign around, everything is moving around it in the scene, right? Maybe check the bottom one down there. If this isn't good, the rest of the stuff is not going to work well. So you want to make sure your track is good. And if it's super erratic, try making sure your polygon's not going off to the edges, or choosing a less intensive option of motion to track. But for sure, do not just rely on these like squiggly lines to see the quality of the track. Make sure you set it to steady each time, because otherwise you're in for a world of pain otherwise later on when things don't line up. Now, we don't actually need this ACES transform that's going to 709 anymore, or this sharpen. So you could get rid of those or just leave them off to the side. I'm interested in the planar tracker tool that we just created here. I'm going to hit Shift to release it and bring it over to this part of my comp so that I can use this to composite with. So what I'm going to be doing, instead of using this merge that we looked at a little bit earlier, now we're back in ACES world, so I want to turn my view LUT on. I'm going to use the transform footage as my background, and I'm going to use this logo as my foreground. And when I'm looking at this, I'm going to pick and flick that over there. I'm going to change the mode over here. First, I'm going to go to my reference frame so that I can line things up on there. I'm going to hit go, so that takes me to frame 71, and then choose the corner pin that's built into this tool itself. So what it means is if I line up this logo or, onto the billboard on this frame, the rest of the, data is going to follow along with it. So I'm just going to do that by just grabbing those points and sort of roughly placing that into the scene. It doesn't need to be super exact right now because you'll see we're going to be making some further adjustments, and I just want you to see how that is working. Command F sort of fits it to the frame. We have sort of a really bad corner down there at the bottom, so I will just adjust that a little bit. And you can see it match moves and it follows along just fine. But the issues we're looking at now, one, the color doesn't match and it's super distorted. You can clearly see this logo has been squashed, and if you're working on a project for a client, they would hate it if their logo did not look like it's supposed to look like on the billboard that they paid you for, right? The most simple way to do it, if you don't actually know the pixel dimensions and you kind of need to eyeball it, which if you don't know the dimensions, you have to eyeball it really, is to add a crop node right after the element that you're inserting. And then look at the comp. So I'm looking through the planar tracker over here, okay? And then I know this is squashed in this direction. So I'm going to say keep centered and then kind of pull this out so that it's it's looking a little bit normal. So this is one way to do it, okay? Now, because it's a billboard and billboards, you can go online. This page right here was telling me that this is 1056 by 288 so that we're not just guessing. I'm going to start over here and hit a sticky note by hitting shift space, and we'll create a sticky note. I'm going to paste that information in there. So this is just to tell me what are the actual dimensions of this sign, because I need to make a background that's those dimensions. So I'm going to get rid of this crop here because we can actually do this a little bit more elegantly. And I'm going to create a new background node. This background node has the image tab over here, and by default, it just takes whatever the media in one resolution is, but we can change this. So we can make this resolution here, which is going to be really helpful. Before you do that though, you need to turn off auto resolution. If you don't, it's not going to let you do this. So we're going to change the background node to being 1056 by 288. And if I load that into the monitor, hey, that looks like a billboard size. So we're getting somewhere with this. I want to be placing my footage on top of this so that it's distorted by the planar tracker. How are we going to do that? Well, I'm going to say this is a background, and I'm going to place this footage on top of it and be able to transform it however I want. So if I'm going to place this on top of this, the best way to merge those, or easiest way, is to take what you want on top and kiss it to what you want below, okay? So taking the two outputs, kissing them, creates a merge automatically. And you can see we've got something here to work with. Obviously, it's way too large, and it's best to always show your work. So I'm going to shrink it down using a separate transform node. So XF, shift space XF will be the transform node. And on this transform node, you can come over here to size and shrink it down so that it fits within that section and you have some like white space around it. This basically right here, this would be our new output of what we want to stick into the planar tracker. So I'm going to take it from the output of the merge into the planar tracker, and now we're getting somewhere, except everything is like too large. And this goes back to there's a concept called definition of domain or domain of definition. I forget what it's called, but basically what's happening is we're getting more information that's not getting clipped off from this node right here. I just want this to pass through. And the way I found, and I think it's useful to clip that off, there's a tool called set domain, okay? Set domain is going to basically cut off this information top and bottom so that when it's placed on the planar tracker's corner pin data, we're not getting all this extra spillover. So on the set domain tool, I'm going to go to the set tab, not the adjust tab. The adjust one is nice if you're going to feed it more inputs, but we're not. We're going to say set, and that just sort of clips it off so that when it goes into the planar tracker, things are working for us. We can even, if you want to get this a little bit fancier, you can add the motion blur at this time. Go to the settings tab, turn on motion blur. Anything in Fusion that moves something, in the settings tab, there should be a motion blur tab. And you want it to look more realistic, you want to turn that on and turn it on to 10. The only thing is, you can see it just slowed down my performance here on this computer. So if you don't want to preview it, you can right click down here in this dead space and turn motion blur off. Okay, you could even turn off high quality. That might speed things up a little bit. If we take a look here at the top of this comp right here, there is something it looks like it's sort of being bowed or stretched. A lot of times that can happen from lens distortion. And this is a really good trick to know if you have to deal with curved screens for any reason. And that's the grid warp tool. So I'm going to introduce the grid warp tool. It's not super necessary for this comp, but it's a good thing to understand because a lot of times your footage won't line up because lines after you shoot them are not going to be super straight. So if I look at my set domain, this is what we're looking at. The first thing we need to do is add the crop tool because I need to give myself some wiggle room, some elbow room, right? So that I can have an alpha channel that I can distort into. And all this needs to happen before you track, not after, okay? Or before you apply tracking data. So if I load the crop tool over here and I take a look, now I have this is black right now. This is not the default. So if you turn this checker underlay on, you can see that's transparency. Now the crop tool, to get things centered and working like we want, because I just want to keep this and just put a little around it, we're going to say, and the crop tool will say keep centered and keep aspect ratio. Those are important, but it's still super huge, right? I don't need all this extra space. So I'm going to drag either the X or Y size down so I can just have a little bit of room to distort and sort of make like a curved edge along here, okay? So what that's done, if you look at the planar track now, is it's sucked it in, but we can always pull these points out later, right? The planar tracker is always going to be locked to those 4 points. We just needed a little bit of alpha room here so we can do some grid warping distortion. And I'm going to be adding the shift space grid warp tool, all right? Grid warp, so I'm going to load this into the viewer, is you have a source over here and a destination. The way I like to work with it is I start with my source and I turn this to selected and I turn this all the way down to a 1 grid. So basically meaning just the corners have grid points on them. And then if I need more, you can always add more to it, right? So if you need to have distortion in different areas, but the simpler the better, so that you should get a really clean, smooth line. This is our source. This is where it's starting from. And then you go to the destination tab over here, and this is where it's going to land. This is where it's going to distort to. So let's say I wanted to have this so that it sort of bows up along here to the right and kind of gives like a hill top to it or something. With grid warp selected, I'm going to select a point here. Now, I'm just sort of lasso selecting it. You can see it has tangent handles, right? Just like you're used to from polygons. Well, you can take that while you're in this destination, and it's taking the original pixels and then it's bending it and distorting it up, right? So you can do that with both sides easily, and you kind of get something that kind of, is bending in the middle. So when you look at this through the planar tracker, once it's comped together, you can perfectly line up any sort of those little distortions without having to deal with all sort of lens distortion workflows and stuff like that, or curved monitors. So let's take a look at this now through the planar tracker, and you'll see we have bended the top of that out. It's probably more than it needs to for this, but I just wanted to exaggerate it so you can sort of see how that's possible, because you might have that happen in your shots. So the planar tracker itself now, it's not going to the edges. We want to bring this out to the edges, and let's do it on the reference frame of frame 71. And we can take these points now and pull them out. It's really hard to see the sky, where the sky is and where the billboard is. So one thing you can do is open your viewer, and down here we've got this gain and stops. It's kind of helping, but we also have gamma. So if you gamma down and and gain up, you might be able to get a little bit more contrast to sort of see where that edge actually is. I don't know, that didn't help a ton, but this is just a viewer thing down here, so it's not actually color correcting the footage or anything. It's just to try to give you a little bit more to see. All right, so let's take this all the way to that edge right there, and looks like we maybe should pull this down a little bit. And we're not in too bad a space right there. If we wanted to adjust this so it wasn't quite so aggressive, you could come back here, look at it through here, but select these points, you know, and pull it down a little bit if it's too much for your liking. I like to apply color correction as close to upstream as possible, typically on the original footage that's been transformed. So we're doing it after it's been converted to ACEScg. I'm going to add a shift space, a CC color correct tool. And on the color correct tool, I don't know where to pull this to yet, but if I go back and reference the original plate, and I can do that by, you know, and do a comparison view by going up here to changing this to the buffer B view, right? So if I choose buffer B and then load the original footage into this one, I can use this to sort of sample from. Now this also brings up another point. As soon as you load into a new viewer, you have to go back to your viewlets and enable this, and it doesn't even have this one loaded right away. So I'm going to choose my viewlet for this viewer, the B viewer, and then I'll choose ACEScg, and it should be giving me a viewlet. Sometimes it's kind of weird, and it's actually not at the moment. So let me change this off. And if this happens to you, just know you're not alone. But yeah, for some reason this piece of it is not, the slider, the gamma slider and the gain slider is not working for it right now. So I don't know, maybe it's a bug. But now this gives me the opportunity to see the original plate, which I can see the white value here. So one way you can always see pixel values in Fusion is down here at the bottom. It goes away as soon as I move my cursor down here. But if you take a look down here when I move my cursor, that tells you the code value that you can match to. Now, I can't remember that number, so a cheat that I do is I take a new background node, and I take the color picker, and I sample. The default sample size is 1 by 1, and so sometimes you might get noise or grain when you sample that way. So another way you can do this is you click, hold, and drag, and you have to keep the mouse pressed, and then hold Command or Command or Control. You can get a little bigger box. So now when I go sample, it's going to take an average this time of a 5 by 7 area. So when I load this into the viewer, I have like a little sample color that I can be referencing here on this viewer instead of the other white. But beyond that, what I can also do is the background node, I can pin over here. So this little pin button up here. Pin basically just means like it does on social media. It stays up there so you can reference values when you're in another tool. So if I come back over here to my color corrector, I can have my color corrector here and the background node with these color values. This is really handy because I can actually use these as gain values because I'm working in linear light. I'm working with no gamma to get that exact same white color. It's super cool. The way you do that is under the channel area, we have areas for red, green, and blue. We'll just use these with the gain slider here to match those. So for red, choose red, and then it'll take this red value from that grayish swatch, Command C, go to the gain value, Command V. Okay, it looks weird now, it's because we haven't done them all yet. Choose the channel green, go to the green value down here, Command C, go over here to gain, Command V, go to the blue value, and then I have to scroll down a little, run out of space. Command C, over here, Command V. And now what we've just done is we've matched this sort of grayish value over here. It's looking much, much nicer, right? So this is, we'll take a look before the color correction. Command P as a pass-through. Way too bright. But with it on, it's looking pretty good. Now, the red in my mind is maybe a little bit too saturated from what was on Mr. Rogers originally. So this is another step you might want to think about taking a look at on this example right here. So if I go back to my B viewer, this time I'm going to load the Mr. Rogers into frame, and so he has a nice red sample, and so does the logo. So if I go over here and choose buffer split wipe, what that's letting me do is see both of them at the same time. So you can wipe this across. And if it's ever super far off screen and you're zoomed in on something, you can hit Option and Command or Alt and Control, I think, and click, and it makes that point jump to exactly where you're at. So here we have a section where there's like two different reds, and they're sort of, you know, different levels of saturation. So you could go in here and refine this further in the color corrector and just reduce the saturation. I don't need this other background over here for the color, so I'll undo the pinning control, and then next time I click it, it goes away. Now, I want to reduce saturation but I want to make sure I'm doing on all RGB channels. Once you do those individual channel corrections, go back to RGB and then maybe just pull this saturation down so it matches a little bit closer. And if you need more precision, hold Command or Control on the number area here, and you can get a lot more precise with your adjustments. I'm going to hit the period key, which is the shortcut for the A buffer. And so now you can see we have this plate that really nicely matches the environment. But one thing that's really bothering me is that the sky is really close in value to the actual color of the billboard. So while we're in Fusion, why don't we take advantage of some of the masking tools that are available to do a slight blue color correction to the sky. We're going to add a color corrector to this instead. So Shift Space CC, and don't do what I just did, which adds it directly after the footage. What you want to do is pull this out so we're on a separate branch. Okay, we're gonna put a fork in the road. I'm gonna hold Shift to disconnect it, and I will take the footage, put it into the color corrector, and I just want to be color correcting. This has the option of color correcting everything, but I just want to deal with midtones and highlights. I'll do midtones and pull this just a little bit blue, and then actually maybe that's too much, and then, or sorry, highlights, and then I'll do midtones, could probably be a little bit more aggressively blue or something like that. And you can see what that's doing to the image. I haven't done any masking selection like qualifiers to this yet. To qualify just the sky, I'm gonna hit Shift Space a Luma keyer, okay, LKY is the shortcut for it. And what this does is it pulls an alpha for you. So if I load that in, you can kind of see what we've got. If you want to just see the alpha, easier is to just go up here or hit A. And the white is the part that we'll be keeping. The black part will not keep. So I want to keep the blue area, the sky area. So I want to make that white. Come over here and you just pull in on the inspector area. Just pull in the areas that you don't want to see. So like I don't want to see the foreground, so I'm making that black, and the sky I do want to see, so I'm trying to make that white as much as I can. So you're kind of just choking those values together. I would not worry about these highlights down here. It's actually normal for things to reflect from the sky, so maybe just a touch of blur to soften those edges on that matte just a little bit. And this will get you in a decent spot. We don't have to worry about this "won't you be my neighbor" part because we're going to cover that up with our new logo. So to apply this, you just want to take the output of the Luma keyer into the mask input of the color corrector. Take a look, and you don't see anything because it's not looking at color. So back up over here to the color channel, and there you go. As with anything in color correction, less is more. So what I want to do is under the color corrector itself, on the settings tab, this blend slider is kind of like a transparency slider. So if you bring this down to 50% or so, that's probably plenty. So if I turn this on and off, you can see it's doing quite a bit to make that sky bluer, but it's not overpowering. And then I also don't have to worry about these edges being, super like exact and whatnot. Here's the thing. We have a planar tracked surface, but it's already got the background attached. So the planar tracker itself has a merge mode that's foreground over background. It's acting as a merge. You can set this so it's foreground only. By doing that, it's only going to take the foreground, obviously, the insert. And so you can do your own merge outside of the tool itself, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to click Shift Space, Merge, MRG. And the background would be the city footage, right? The color corrected city footage, which is that. And then on top, we're going to be putting the screen insert. So now you can see we've got sort of a whitish billboard screen, and we've got the bluish sky behind it because we put that color corrector on. So just give us a little bit of extra separation. Now to wrap up some of the work we're doing over here in Fusion, I want to give you a big bird's eye view of what we've done so far. So I'm going to close the inspector so you can screen capture this if you want. But basically, we've taken our original footage, we've done some color correction. That is our new background with the bluer sky. And then we've used the planar tracker in foreground only mode. Now, we don't have this actually back out to the edit page yet because nothing's going out media out. So we do need to make sure we make the connection from the merge, which is putting it all back together, through the ACES transform, which the ACES transform, again, is taking us from ACEScg back into Sony S-Log3. So it's just like the footage that we received. And then media out is going to take us back to the timeline to do rendering, as well as when you go to the color page now. To do some quick color correction to this, I would go and simply apply effects, ACES transform to get this from using ACES 1.3 from the Sony log 3, sgamut 3, and instead of going this time to ACEScg, my monitor is Rec 709, so I'm choosing that. And at this point, you can use the reference gamut compression if you like to do that, because this is the end of the pipeline. This is your DI, this is your color correction, this is your telecine, color transfer, whatever you want to call it. But we want to do our color grading underneath this LUT, right? So we have the most dynamic range to make changes. I'm going to hit Shift S to add a node before it. And I think this shot particularly is probably too dark, so I'm going to go to the HDR controls, increase the exposure. I'm going to take a look at it on my display over here that's calibrated, bring that gamma up to where sky I think should be. We can increase saturation so that we get a little bit more color pop to the image, maybe even, you know, do something a little bit with the color temperature right now. If you take a look at the waveforms, maybe a little bit on the blue side, you could, you know, I'm not a big colorist, but you can just take a little bit of that blue out of the overall image. And look at this, I'm not even rendering this thing, it's playing real time. In fact, it should have the motion blur enabled on that screen insert, which it does. So this is after, and this is before. I'm Chadwick. I appreciate you so much. If you enjoyed this one, maybe check out the tutorial that I have on phone screen replacements on screen now. And because there's so much more to learn, I'll see you in the next video.